Oh, Talisman. Something about my story about this, but this is one of the worst games I own. Just in terms of sheer annoyance, and especially compared to the fact that people actually like it. It is horrible, but I've played a whole lot of it because, again, people actually like it, and also it was a certain cultishness to it. But the biggest reason I ended up playing it was both my wives were into it as just sort of a way to pass time. And it was something that could just be done, and it didn't matter. But there's almost no strategy. The rules are a shit show and everything. How did I get this? Because I had played it already and knew it sucked. Well, let me think. I was living dirt poor with the girl who was going to become my first wife. And, we would go out and try to collect bottles so that we could eat for the day or whatever. We had very, very little money left. And I went to Goodwill just because. And this was the greatest find. I don't find games at thrift shops very often. Well, in this case, I found the original Talisman, whatever expansions came that were just cards. I know there was at least one. There may have been more than one. The dungeon. I don't remember if the city was in there. Okay. Each one was under $1, like 50 cents. The Talisman box was like 50 cents. The other ones, I don't know. We got markings on this. The dungeon says $1.29, but it was not $1.29. Pretty damn sure. In addition to all the games, pretty much unused they may have been entirely unused at that price. Each of them included all of the minis. Now, normally I wouldn't have ever picked up the minis for Talisman, but this was a circumstance where, I just couldn't pass up. I kind of bought it for the minis, to tell you the truth. My thought was, well, I have minis for D&D and whatnot. Even if I fucking hate Talisman, I can scavenge them out. Instead, we ended up, first of all, the adventure cards for this set were in black and white. So we ended up using watercolors to paint color in on them. And we ended up using various paints on the minis as well and playing what we had. And that was a lot of fun. Later on, as I got, into a slightly better financial situation, i.e. we had income, and, we went and bought whatever expansions were available as they came out. The dungeon we already had. I'm pretty sure we did not have the Timescape, but I don't know. Maybe one of Timescape or City was in that original set. I don't remember. I got it all for like less than $2.50, whatever it was, but that was hard to do. I saw them there, and we had to go out hunting bottles to get the money that I could buy this with. And like foregoing food that day. Now we found something to eat too. But yeah, it was pretty fucking exciting. And it was like, well, can we afford this $5 for all of this? And like, whatever. Yes. And because, I certainly could have found a buddy to pay 10 or 20 bucks for it without the minis. probably. Anyway, we ended up picking up the other things and having to buy the minis that went with the other games, at least in some cases. Some of them didn't end up coming up. The dragons, I think, didn't end up coming up with minis, and we had to pick that up separately. And I used minis out of my collection for those. All right. What can we say about the game? Yeah, so this is what's complicated, because each of these boards, each of these worlds has its own set of rules. Let me go over the basics and add in whatever modifications I've put in play. And by the way, different sets have different colors to the backs of the cards. Some of the cards came from like a Space Gamer or something, and were pasted together from that. I just went with whatever I go with. Okay, so the core game is just a roll and move, and each player will have a character which it has a set of special abilities, has some stats, and some traits about them. So your special abilities are what are going to differentiate you and generally make you better or worse than other characters, but your stats are also important. You'll have a strength and an intelligence, and those are tracked with these red for strength and blue for intelligence numbers. You have a number of lives. It generally starts out as 4 for each player. You get a little bit of gold, like 1 each. And you start in a location described on your card. How do you select which player you have? Well, there's many different ways. For my game, what we're going to do is deal out 3 cards to each player. I'm going to play with 4 players. And pick one. And then we shuffle the deck back together, because if you die, you get another character completely at random. So your first choice of characters, you get a little bit more option as to picks. This works pretty well. All the players in the original game started around this central board. Later, there may be some characters who start here or in the Timescape. You never start in the dungeon. You move around the board, you land on spaces, and some of them just tell you to do something or give you certain opportunities. So let's find one that tells you to do something. The graveyard. Well, if you're good, you lose a life. If you're evil, you can invoke spirits and roll a die, and it might be good or bad. If you're neutral, you can't do anything now. Some of them give you opportunities to make choices or do nothing. So like at the village, you can heal, or you can visit the blacksmith and buy items, as many as you like, that you can afford at those prices. And those are cards that are over here. I'll explain cards in a while. You're basically able to haul around, I think it's 4 objects with you. And objects can help you in fighting. They can help you carry other objects. They can help you with all kind of stuff. Or you could visit the mystic and you just roll a die and maybe you get something good, maybe not. Many of the spaces draw cards for them. So like this will say draw 1 card. If there's not a card there, you draw 1, you put it there face up. If it's a monster, you have to deal with it. If it's a treasure, you can pick it up. It might also be a location, in which case you can visit it. Okay. All pretty exciting. That's the center, that's the outer rim of the board. You can't cross the river normally, although there are ways to do so. If you have an axe or you can build a raft, which allows you to drift across it when you're in certain locations that have trees in them. You might have other ways to get across the river, but the standard way is this space. If you land on this space, you draw a card, but if you roll enough, and you'll roll 1 die for movement normally and choose your direction off that. If you roll enough to get to, let's say I'm here and I roll a 3, I could go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, or I could go 1, 2, and 3, right? So I have many, many choices. But crossing this barrier has a particular problem. If you pass through the bridge to the middle region, you draw no card, but you have to defeat the Sentinel, who will be strength 9. Which means if you want to get up there, you have to be able to beat a monster of strength 9, which is fairly high. Characters, well, the average starting character has a strength and intelligence each of 3. I think the highest is a 6 on either side of that. So you're going to have some equipment or some magic items or something to get you past him. There are spells that allow you to pass by too. It's fairly easy to get yourself to buy yourself an axe and cross though if you want to. Why would you do this? Well, there are some good things up here, but the monsters that are up here quite often have a bonus to their combat roll. They're stronger than the enemies that you'd face on the lower level. So generally you don't even want to go up here until you can deal with this guy. Sometimes there's particular advantages though. If you go into here, that can be a particularly useful space. This guy's bonus is you can ask him for a quest to let you have a talisman. And when you succeed in that quest, you teleport immediately back to him to get the talisman. There's no way to remember what the quests are, so you might have to write that down or something if you play the way I do. If you play the way well, in terms of like when I play solo, when I play anything, I try not to play this solo. I think I've done it once or twice, but when you play anything, when you play this in an opposed circumstance, you know, you're just sitting there straight through, rolling some dice, moving around, and you can remember what your quest is if you have it. And if you forget, well, that's terrible. I don't know. Okay. But none of this tells you what the goal of the game is. The goal of the game in the core game was to get up here and you'd obtain the Crown of Command. But there were expansions that changed that. The Talisman expansion, I think, added these cards, which are 6 different random endings that are stronger than the Crown of Command, that are different from the Crown of Command. The Crown of Command was kind of a painful ending. Basically, you rolled dice and tried to make somebody submit, and they could be working their way up to fight you on their way up there. If they kill you while you're up there, the game is over for the person who just died, and then they'd have the Crown of Command and be able to affect other people with it. But anyway, there's 6 different endings over there. Dragons changed things and said, oh no, we don't want to have 6 endings anymore, even though you have that from the expansion. Instead, you face only one of those endings, which was the Dragon King, instead of adding another ending or something like that. And you have to defeat that. Well, I have decided in my infinite wisdom to keep the 6 ending choice, even though I've got dragons in the game. I've also toned dragons down. Dragons had a horrible effect on the game. So the dragons expansion was basically throw a bunch of powerful cards in that are dragon related, that are hard to beat, and get rid of this. And I felt like, oh wow, that just fucking ruined the game as far as I was concerned, because it made the starting monsters and treasures and whatnot too powerful, or there were too many powerful things mixed in there, so it became a more random game. And certain characters just weren't able to face the new environment very well. So there are 2 cards in there, Dragon Dawn and Dragon Sleep. Well, the first time a Dragon Dawn comes up, it activates all the other dragon cards. But until the Dragon Dawn comes up, I ignore any dragon cards drawn and draw again. It's a solution to give a little bit more time to play that out. I don't think the Dragons expansion was well thought out. It made the game painful in many ways. Okay, but let's go back to what's going on here, because I've just explained everything I'm going to explain about the Dragon expansion. It's just some additional cards and how I'm going to deal with them. All right, to get through the Portal of Power, what do? You have to make a strength or cleverness check, intellect check rolling 2 dice equal to or lower than the chosen thing, and then you go up here. Once you make it up here, you no longer roll dice. So once you make it through the door, your movement stops here. And then you move 1 space per turn going in one of these directions. Those 2 directions are different. They each have different penalties. So this one will just cost you lives, and you can sacrifice followers instead. It'll force you to fight some very weak physical creatures. Why? Well, you got to be pretty strong to get up here. The reason why is because this requires that you roll against your craft, one of the options when you go here. But here you use 2 dice against either craft or strength. Here you're going to be used 3, and basically that means you need about a 10 or higher in the statistic required to be able to get through that. Now there's things that modify your capabilities to get through that, and there's things that just modify your stat that make it easier. But this is the main hurdle in this direction. In this direction, you have an opposite to that where you have to have strength at the same level, and you'll challenge that with 3 dice. So being able to get through here isn't that big a deal. It's being able to get through here that is. Now, other things on this direction is you have to dice with death, which is just, you roll 2 dice against someone else, and you have to get higher than death in order to continue on. Otherwise, you lose a life and keep having to roll each turn. So that can slow you down tremendously. None of these slow you down. They either fail you or whatever. The werewolf's den creates a werewolf with 2 dice worth of strength. Well, since you went through here with strength, you can probably fight a werewolf, and since there are things that help in combat that don't help anywhere else that are fairly common, you probably are going to be able to beat him pretty easily. To enter here, you must have a talisman. Well, you wouldn't go up here if you didn't have one, so maybe somebody stole it from you on your way, and it forces you to start working your way back down. And by the way, when you're working your way back down, you don't encounter these spaces. If you don't have a talisman, you're screwed. If you have a talisman, you can go up here, and then we randomly select, hey, what the actual victory conditions of the game are, and impose them. Okay. That's more or less the core game over here. I'm not giving you everything. The rules are really terrible. They include, and you'll see this when we bubble into certain things, especially in the city. Let's ignore the city for a moment. Dungeon. Well, the dungeon can't be reached until and unless a dungeon doorway shows up somewhere on the board. And at that point, if you land on the dungeon doorway, on your next turn, you can move here. This is a one-way path going through the dungeon. You roll a die to move still. There are some places like the guard room. No, you stop there. Or you have to stop to hit there. Actually, I'm not certain of that. The guard may stop you no matter what. I don't remember. I seem to remember something stops you. It's been fucking forever since I played this. Oh, I forgot about these. They're character sheets. I tend not to use them, but they sort things into nice places and give you spaces for your objects and followers. All right, I need to pause for a bit because I need to look up. I think this is a location where no matter what, you're stopped and you have to deal with him. Much as this is a barrier. He's fairly easy to fight. Now, I'm going to ignore that until somebody goes in there and then I'll look it up. Well, I better look at it. If I'm mistaken, I think you do just, it's only if you land there that you're affected by it. Which is good because it doesn't fucking say anything about it. There are some plain old bad spaces here like the torture chamber or the cell where bad stuff happens to you. The dungeon's a little bit, uh-oh, I gotta swap batteries. It's a little bit tougher than the outer ring generally is, until dragons come, and has slightly better bonuses, items within it. Largely, I guess it's because the size of the deck. There's a high preponderance of more powerful monsters and more powerful items in there compared to something that, yeah, there's a lot of powerful stuff in there. If it comes up, it could be great. But often the dungeon is the way to level yourself up enough that you can go up here comfortably. There are plenty of ways to find talismans otherwise, so don't worry too much about him not giving you one. You can get one here. You can find them just lying around. You can steal them from other players. Okay. Once you get to the end of the dungeon, and there are options on this, you roll a die and see where you end up. You could end up right at the Crown of Command. If that happens early in the game, and this is one of the big bonuses of going in the dungeon, if that happens early in the game, you didn't need a talisman, and now you face the end game victory conditions. If it's the Crown of Command, you pretty much win. If it's one of the things you have to defeat, you're probably fucked. So it's kind of an interesting situation where if you weren't playing with those cards, but were playing with the original victory conditions, the dungeon would get you a sort of an automatic victory. Going with the random victory conditions, there's a pretty good chance you're not in great shape. There's maybe 2 or 3 of them, though, that would likely give you a win. Okay. Some of them are like the dragon you wander in and the dragon's not there, you steal his treasure and you win. You know, but that's a 1 in 6 chance if the dragon comes up. Okay. Let's keep going. I'm going to hold off on the city. The city is the most complicated of the expansion boards and probably the most damaging. I know some people didn't like the Timescape. The way the Timescape works is you might slip into there, you might start there, and there are spells that allow you to get there, and maybe items. And when you go to the Timescape, I believe you pop into the warp gate, and then on each turn, you roll a die, and your movement is going to be 1 space along one of these colors. And then you do what that space says. Now, those spaces are significantly more powerful than most of the stuff over on this board. The Timescape cards are quite powerful. Some of these, like the Nexus, allows you to draw 5 adventure cards and choose one, though. That's pretty potent. Some of the stuff you can buy in the Timescape, there's, I don't remember where it is. Space Fortress, where you're allowed to buy equipment, which is more technological in basis. There's some pretty decent equipment in there that maybe is better than the stuff you can get elsewhere on the board. And eventually you land on the vortex, and when you get to the vortex, you roll a die, like in the dungeon. They weren't terribly original here. And see what happens. Trying to see where it is. It's not on here. It's on the Timescape data sheets. The vortex can send you to a number of places, but it can't send you to the Crown of Command. And it generally sends you to this inner region. And it's a way to get there, but maybe not the best. You could get lucky and make your way through the Timescape. And it's easier to do that than to get through the dungeon, but the Timescape can also be really, really potent. And remember, you're experiencing each space, you're experiencing movement one at a time, so you don't end up skipping over spaces very easily, generally. And most of the time, you've got to go through the Warp Demon, who is very potent. You only have a 1/3 chance of getting out through the vortex without facing him. The Warp Demon is Strength of 12 and Craft of 12, you choose which kind of combat to fight. If you lose a life. If you win, though, you gain 2 of that attribute. And you get flushed either way. So losing a life in this game sounds like a terrible thing, but honestly, it's something that happens quite often to your characters. So don't worry about that too much. So losing a battle against the Warp Demon is well worth the other advantages you might get in the Timescape. The problem with the dungeon is that if you get defeated, you have to retreat. You don't just keep going forward. At any point, you can decide you're fleeing the dungeon, in which case all you do is retreat until you leave. Otherwise, you turn back around and march back through. The dungeon is trickier because of this. It means that you might not make it to the ending. But the ending has the possibility of throwing you into an auto victory. The Vortex does not. Let's go to the city. Oh, the city. What a mess. All right. So the city has a bunch of complicated and interesting spaces, and I'm not going to go into too much detail about it because although the city can wildly change your strategy. So most of this game is kind of wander around, see what you hit, see what you collect, see what you get. Well, with the city, once you land here, this space no longer matters if you play with the city. Once you land here, you can then move into the city. You can't like move from here 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. You have to actually land here to have the opportunity to enter the city, although there are opportunities to enter it from the adventure deck as well. They're rare. To go through the city gate, I believe when you go through here, you have an issue. I believe the town square is sort of an interception space, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't remember. It's been a long time, man. It's been a long time. I don't see that. Entering the city. Yeah, no, that's fine. All right. No, it doesn't stop you. Landing here can be a problem, though. For other spaces in the city, and I'm going to reshuffle these because they're going to get handed out and chosen. For other spaces, you can move around in the city, and the streets work kind of like the spaces out here. Stuff has more of a city flavor, you know? It's kind of iffy crap. If you want to enter a building, you have to leave your animals and crap behind. That's a problem. Now, the way that works trying to find this. Mules, horses, carts, and dragons and other oversized items may not be taken into any of the city's locations apart from the stables or the wharf, and must be left in one of these 2 locations in the street or beyond the city walls. I think that's just dumped in the street, okay? One of the powerful ways to get yourself advantages in this game is things like the horse and cart, which allow you to carry all kind of crap. Things like the war horse, which allow you to fight much better. These big things can't enter the city locations, so once you collect those up, it becomes harder to deal in the city. Basically, you'd leave your ship behind, but somewhere I think it says when you come out, you get that stuff back. Maybe I'm mistaken there. Because there is somebody in the city who you can take as a follower who you can leave outside holding your stuff. Now, the biggie is no matter what, and I have to read to see if you get your stuff when you come back out. I didn't see that there, but I seem to remember that's how we played at least. But the big deal is even if you didn't leave your, even if you don't leave your stuff or lose your stuff automatically and just leave it sitting in the street, even if you pick it up when you come back out, while you're in the building, someone else in the city can walk up and take your stuff, unless you have the follower who holds it, or you park your stuff in the stables, which costs you money. Now, I'm looking for objects. As the rule stand, the mule and similar objects that are used to enable character, no matter how big we suggest limitation. Yeah. Sack. I don't agree. There are certain specific restrictions to some items, though. Okay. One of the biggies in the city is you can't fight in the city streets. You can't throw missiles, throw or fire missiles. You can't do certain special abilities, which, of course, later expansions add to, but don't necessarily tell you if it's illegal in the city. It's illegal to trade in the city without a license, which is, again, a special ability. Casting spells on the street is illegal. All kind of abilities are illegal. It's basically is the issue. Certain characters are just inherently illegal. Now, what that means is any time that you conduct that activity, you have to draw a card and see if the city watch catches you. Quite often the city watch might catch you just wandering around. If you're illegal, that's a problem. But if you do an illegal thing, like cast a spell or something, there's an immediate check for the watch to catch you. Representatives of the law are very active in the city. During normal course of play, a character has a warrant and they draw a city adventure card, and this is a law card. The watch will seek out and make an arrest. You can kill the watch, though. But if the watch wins, they take you to the dungeon, which is tough to get out of. If you beat them or get away from them, you retain your warrant card, but you're not arrested. The watch will also seek to arrest people who have just committed a crime. After resolving an encounter in which you broke one of the statutes, you draw a city adventure card. If there's a law card, the watch will make an arrest. Being a cyborg, ghoul, hobgoblin, whatever, my ruling there is you're not attracting attention unless you do a crime. So even though you are a crime, you don't check automatically. All you do is if you encounter them, they're gonna be upset. If you have no money, this is the big one. You must have cash to be in the city. If you have no money at all and the watch runs into you, they arrest you. And this is how you're usually fucked. Now, one of the potent things in the city is there's a couple of special characters who come up that you can be. And these came from here. You have specific requirements to become them. And I'm trying to remember all of them. The High Mage is the easiest. At the Magic Emporium, you donate a magic object, which could be a crappy talisman or something shitty, and you get a chance to become, maybe you actually automatically become the High Mage, right? You may choose to become High Mage, discard one magic object, and take that High Mage character card. This is a very powerful character. But what it does is it replaces who you are. Your original abilities go away. You become the High Mage and get his very powerful abilities, having to do with spells, etc. And you keep your stats, which may be modified. Like I think you get, I can't read this. I think you get +2 to your craft or something. Having trouble seeing it. What else gives you them? The Royal Castle allows you to become the Sheriff if you roll properly there. I don't remember what you need there. You need to apply for a post. You add your strength to get that. Now, the one thing that we did was, there's only one high mage at any given time, but we allowed people to get appointed to that position while someone else was in it, and they would take it from you. I don't remember if that's in the rules or not, but the reason is the high mage is so fucking powerful that you wanted it to be only temporal. I don't remember how you get to be the master thief. I think that's from an adventure card in here, and maybe the same with the king's champion. I think the two you can become are the sheriff and the high mage. And out of the two, the high mage is far and away the more powerful because he gets a cycle of spells. He also has certain immunities and whatnot. So that's kind of one of your initial goals is, hey, I got a magic item I don't really need. Screw it, I'm going to become the high mage, unless you really like your character class. There are some characters who are, you might be better off not being the high mage. It's unlikely, but it's possible. They've got a spell that you can only cast spells in your own turn unless they're defensive. Yeah, I pretty much follow that. And you can cast a maximum of one spell at a time. That's hard to judge. And I have no problem with someone cycling through a bunch of spells at once if they have that capability to pull them. That's just life. And the high mage is one of those characters who can do that. He can draw a bunch of spells. But the thing is, you might be firing off because you just don't want them, more than anything else. You're searching for better spells, or you might be doing things that have little or no effect just to run through your spells. So, yeah, let it play as it plays. All right, that's sort of a brief intro. I'm not really going into all the details of the rules. Oh, you know what I forgot? I forgot combat. So when you face something in combat, there's a few key rules that I completely forgot. When you face something in combat, you take your total strength and add it to a die roll, and the defender takes its total strength and adds it to a die roll. Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff I forgot. The high roller gets a success on the low roller. That success is usually taking the life of the low roller. If it's a monster or something, it kills the monster. Now, if you killed a monster that uses strength, you get to collect them up, and for every 7 points of such monsters, you can turn them in and gain additional strength. That is not the case for monsters using craft. Hence, craft becomes the harder thing to increase. There are certainly ways to do it, but craft is often the weaker of your stats because you don't have an easy way to increase it. The characters that start with a high strength, get a couple weapons and whatever, can sort of snowball into more and more powerful characters very easily. If you fight a person and beat them, you're allowed to take one of their lives. Now they start with 4, so taking one may not do too much. You're also, instead you're allowed to take an object from them, which could include a bag of gold. You don't see a lot of combat between characters. Every now and then you'll see someone gets a cool item, someone else has an advantage to attack them with it, and can attack them, Like let's say somebody gets a craft item that's useful, they can attack them with strength. There's cool stuff like that happens. You have to land on them directly to do it. If you do that, you don't encounter the space. That's an important aspect. Some of the special abilities allow you to do stuff that's similar to that, which is more likely. And remember, there's no fighting in the city, which means if you fight, there's a chance that you attract the guard. Trying to think anything else. There's something else that I'm missing that's important, but I don't know. Mainly, we're going to see it as it plays out, because again, the main mechanism is roll and move. role competitions with a fight. The game can go on forever and ever and ever, or it can actually escalate really quickly and somebody can win, not right away, but within a ridiculously small amount of time compared to the often everlasting games of Talisman. Anyway, gonna send this up. This will give me the chance to play the mystery game that is flattening over there, or at least to read the rules on it. I think this is going to take quite some time and be quite mindless. And I may quit because there's a reason I haven't pulled this out. It does not play well solitaire. All right, up it goes.